Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, party people. Come on in, mind the balloons and streamers. We're ready to get this shindig going. Grab yourself a little umbrella drink, pull up a beanbag and get comfy for another rip-roaring episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here he is, complete with party hat and tank of helium gas in hand. Welcome to the microphone, Matthew Dickerson.
I'd love to talk like I had helium, but it's just too hard to do without helium, isn't it? Put some effects on afterwards, maybe.
Make this show really, really hard.
That's right. It would. For the whole show, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Now, I want to talk about a topic you raised, actually, today when you came to see me, about odometers and speedometers on vehicles. Now, the latest story going around, of course, as you told me, was that Teslas are being accused of having an overreading of their odometer by 15%.
And continuing on that conspiracy theory, it's also that you get to your warranty quicker.
And so this has all come about because there's a class action, which I know there are class actions and there are class actions, but there's a class action in the US at the moment where a gentleman...
It's just a haven for conspiracy theory. And I don't want to believe it, but, you know, I'd like to know if there's more information going to come out of this.
Well, hopefully a class action will bring that out, but the class action is all about the fact that this particular gentleman says that his odometer was going faster than his actual travel, than his real travel, and that resulted in his warranty expiring earlier than it should have, and then he needed some repairs to his suspension, which he said should have been under warranty, but of course he'd driven past the warranty kilometres or miles in America, and so that resulted in a $10,000 suspension repair bill. That sounds a bit...
And a little nasty message saying suck eggs.
Something like that, that's right. Now, the interesting part here is that Teslas don't apparently record the odometer in the same way that normal vehicles do. So, and to actually go back a step, one of the things I do like about Teslas and some other more modern vehicles is that the speedometer reading is more accurate. Now, in the Australian design regulations, you've got some leeway with your speedometer. If you're a car manufacturer, you bring cars into Australia, you've got to prove that your speedo never ever indicates a speed less than your actual speed. So you can't have a speedo that says you're doing 95 when you're really doing 100.
Yeah, right.
Because that would give you a reasonable argument with the police if you got booked doing 100. Well, my speedo was only 95.
Yeah.
So they can't ever go in that direction, but they can go in the other direction. And there's a fair bit of leeway there. Your indicated speed on your speedo can be up to 10% plus 4 kilometres per hour higher than your actual speed. So if you're doing 100, that means you could go 10%, 110, plus 4, 114. So your speedo could show 114 kilometres an hour when you're doing 100.
And see, look, when I'm doing long trips, we might have a podcast going. We might have Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson running over the speakers or whatever. But I'll always be doing maths. I do a lot of maths in my head when we're doing long trips. And so often we arrive at our destination at a time that is later than what I thought we were based on how fast we were travelling. We've always got to drive a little bit faster in order to make the time that I thought we were going to make.
And in the old days...
I put it down to them miscalculating with those little signs on the side of the road telling you how far the next town is. I thought they were wrong.
Well, I'm a bit like you, a bit of a nerd doing some maths because I'm doing the same thing as I'm going along. It feels like you're cheating when you put your sat-nav in and it tells you the time you get there. No, I want to work it out. But I used to put it down to the fact that you lose more time than you realise when you go through the small town, 60K somewhere.
Yes, and I was factoring that in as well.
Yep.
And I was also thinking, maybe I'm going a little bit wider on the corners or a little bit shallower on the corners, all these things, all these forgiveness things, but it's really just about the manufacturers.
Possibly. All these people out there now saying we don't want to go for a car trip with Matthew and James because it sounds pretty boring. But I think the thing is...
Look, it's funny when my wife says, what are you thinking about?
You don't want to tell her.
Well,
funny you should ask. I'll just give you a 20 minutes.
Got to carry the 2 and then you're dividing by 120. Yeah.
So one of the things that I found, and I had read about that Australian design rule, it's 18/03 for those people interested out there and looking up their ADRs. When I first got a phone that had a Speedo app on it, I went, I wonder how my speed is compared to my speedometer, not knowing about 18/03 at the time. And I found that I was going significantly slower in terms of what my phone was showing compared to the speedo, and that's when I started looking into it and found the 10% plus the 4K. So then I went, well, hold on, I can now go faster, but not every car has 10%. Obviously, that's the maximum they can read under, but it doesn't mean they will. But one thing I was impressed with Tesla when I first got a Tesla was I did the speed app next to the car while I was driving along, someone in the passenger seat, of course, and I found the speed was very accurate. It was maybe 1 kilometre out. So if I was doing 100 kilometres on the speedo, my GPS phone was saying maybe 99. Oh, that's good. That's more impressive. But apparently Tesla doesn't record the distance in the same way as a normal car would record the distance, which I find fascinating. Surely it's got accurate information in terms of GPS.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, just doing all that with GPS. Yeah.
But apparently it has things like energy consumption, driving behaviour, predictive algorithms. All of these are measuring the actual distance. So I'm confused by that. Why would you do all that?
It sounds like the opposite of Occam's razor. You go the longest, most difficult option.
That's right, not the simplest one at all.
Wow.
So anyway, so there might be something in all of this, but it's worthwhile just checking in one of those speed apps in if you're driving a normal car or even if you're driving a Tesla, checking that against your actual speed. I'm not encouraging people to speed here, of course, but it's better to know your accurate speed. And so sometimes when you go past a policeman and you look down and you go, oh no, I'm doing 110, it's 100, I wonder if I'll get booked. Sometimes I used to put it down to, they've got a bit of leeway, the police. I mean, they could book you at 101. good police person, that one. But maybe it's just the fact that I was actually doing under 100 because the speedo was so far out. And, of course, police might give you a bit of leeway. Officially, they could book you for 101 because you might have broken the speed.
Well, it's a speed limit, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a limit.
It's a
limit.
limit.
That's where you're supposed to go up to.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting that you maybe have gotten away with things not because there was a good person sitting in the police car. It was just the fact that you were doing under the speed anyway without realising it.
Without realising it.
Anyway, we'll keep an eye on this one.
Cheated out of our speeds. All right, well, taking a look at the lineup for today, I see that we're gazing skywards at what's happening in the world of drones. Feels like it's been a while since we last talked about drone technology. I see that China is into building humongous bridges, so we'll investigate how many Mississippis you'll get for a well-hocked loogie over the railing on that one. And for the fans of the 60s adventure show Flipper, we'll see how easy it is to hold a conversation with dolphins these days. But that's all to come later. Our first story is going to leave you a bit out of breath. Now, I like to run. Though I'm yet to take on half a marathon, I think I know from experience at least a little of what it's like to train hard for a cause. Maybe one day I'll have a crack at that 22Ks. But when you're really put in the hours for a cause, it's really hard when someone shows up at the starting line who you know hasn't done any training, and then they outperform you, hardly breaking a sweat. Spare a thought for the runners who lined up for a half marathon in Beijing recently, only to find 21 humanoid robots also had joined them at the starting line there. Matt, this is it. The seal has been broken. Man versus machine. The day has arrived.
This is the first one where you've had humanoid robots competing in the same race against the runners.
Now, there's all this arguments about transgender and all that sort of stuff. This is going to blow that out of the water.
That's right. What gender do you have for these humanoid robots? Terrible idea. So I like the fact that, I'll give you some times in a minute, but I like the fact that they didn't win. So it's
that's good.
A tick
that's
for the humans.
Start.
The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the distance. So it's always been intriguing to me, and I did actually bother to look it up one day because I was intrigued by why the marathon, and then hence the half marathon, is such a strange distance. So the half marathon is 21.0975 kilometres, obviously exactly half the full marathon. The full marathon originally, I suppose, measured in miles, 26 miles and 385 yards. So I just assumed that was a distance that was from Athens to Marathon, the original story of running a marathon. But it wasn't. The distance from Athens to Marathon is a little bit less than that. That distance was arrived at unofficially, then officially eventually, after the 1908 Olympics in London. And the royal family said, gee, it would be nice to start the marathon at Windsor Castle with the kids. See the start, and then you finish at the Royal Box at White City Stadium.
Of course.
And, of course, the organiser said, well, this is the royal family asking for this. Sure thing. We'll modify the distance a bit. And that distance from Windsor Castle around the course they'd mapped out to the Royal Box was 26 miles, 385 yards. So that was the distance unofficially.
Not 386 yards, 385 yards.
Apparently.
Right. Yeah, okay.
And then the next Olympics, well, if you're going to have an event that's got a standard distance, well, you've got to do the same. So the next Olympics they did it, and it wasn't until 1921, not 2021, took a bit short of that, 1921, that the IAAF officially said, okay, we're going to ratify the official distance of the marathon. It was 26 miles, 385 yards, and then converted to kilometres. So that's where we come up with this strange distance. So it's amazing how we get these things, especially with every other event being a round number, 100 metres, 400 metres.
How many swimming pools is that?
How many laps of swimming pool can you do in that time? So we've got robots, 21 humanoid robots. The idea was, it's actually not a bad idea, some Chinese manufacturers are really being encouraged, strongly encouraged to get robotics. The whole industry is going to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars when they finally get to the stage where we can have robots picking up clothes around my house. I'm not going to spend that much, but people around the world will spend
that's the standard. That's the mark that we're going for.
That's what I'm looking for
Being able
anyway.
to pick up clothes in your house, not
right.
anybody else's house.
No, I've got no steps, so it makes it easy for them.
Yeah, right, okay.
I just need them and wheels. Yeah, they probably get around in wheels, but I'd prefer them walking around. Just feels more comfortable for some reason. But they've been encouraged to go and do things with robots because they think the Chinese government thinks it's a huge industry there, which I think is right. So they had robots entered. There were 21 various sizes, 120 centimetres to 180 centimetres. There was no...
Various numbers of legs?
No, they were all bipedal.
Okay.
No set...
Or humanoid, yeah.
Or humanoid, yeah. No set rules apart from basically humanoid. And then go for it. Now, each robot had to be accompanied by a human trainer, so they'd have someone that could run a marathon with them. But it wasn't that hard because the winner, Tiangong Ultra, Tiangong Ultra, completed the half marathon in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Now, that's not that impressive.
No.
I'm only a very basic amateur runner, but when I've done a few half marathons, I've done them in under an hour 40.
Yeah.
So I beat the robots by an hour.
And I think like Olympic records and stuff for the marathon is about 2 hours. Isn't it?
About 2 hours. So the winner of this particular race, human winner, did it in 1 hour and 2 minutes. So smashed the robots. Fantastic. One for the good guys. But they finished it. Well, not all of them. Some of them had some issues. Some of them required some battery changes. Some of them fell over at the start line. Some of them ran into things. One ran into a railing. This is despite they've got a human trainer.
There's a Monty Python sketch that I'm visualising here.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
I'm thinking of
the was it 100 metres for people with no sense of direction?
That's
and
right.
blow the starting gun and everyone just stares off him. Anyway.
And the other one was the marathon for people with
weak bladders, yes. Yeah, that's right. Keep running off the road into the bushes.
So they weren't all fantastic. They weren't all perfect, but they really showed that it can be done. And look, they took it all in good fun. They had some that put running shoes on, the latest running shoes to make them run a bit better. Some wore boxing gloves, some wore motivational headbands. So they got into the spirit of it. But we'll laugh about this in a few years' time. 2 hours and 40 minutes. We'll see robots doing 1 hour and 40 minutes, 1 hour. We'll see robots winning these races at some point in the future. But again, it was a real contest amongst the manufacturers to show where they're at, what they could do with it. So it really is about that investment in robotics. And I like what China's doing. China's saying, we're going to be the future nation. We're going to invest in EVs. We're going to invest in batteries. They've done huge amounts of investments in things like lithium, processing of lithium, not necessarily mining, but processing. Because if you want some of the raw materials that you can use in things like EVs or even robotics, then you need to get it processed somewhere. You might be able to mine it in some country, but you need to get it processed. China just about has a monopoly on that, which is a bit scary, but also very smart from the Chinese government. Even some of the things that the Americans use in their fighter planes need to be processed in China, which I'm sure America isn't that comfortable about. So this is great news. It's getting me one step closer to being lazier, which is what I'm after.
And did you know what? I just had a thought. This could open up like a whole new sport where we have half marathon running robots, but combine that with robot wars or robot battles that they have. There's a TV show where they battle robots, BattleBots, where they've got weapons and stuff and they whack each other as they're running along this course. And they can be like shooting flames at each other and it's the battle at the end. And really, what's the cost at the end of it? Just a bit of metal.
That's right. So the boxing gloves are soft, you're thinking.
When you said boxing gloves, all of a sudden I thought, well, what else could you attach there? And you could have hammers and all sorts of, And
a few sneaky ones going ahead, putting a string across the road so they trip them over. And look, I'm not like
and no
where
harm,
you're going
no foul.
here.
It's just open slather. It's like old school gladiators. phone cases. Now, we never needed them back in the days of the classic Nokia 3310, but once the first guy dropped his new iPhone on the kitchen tiles back in 2007, it became pretty clear that phone cases were a must-have accessory for all smartphone users. And a whole new industry was born. But when was the last time you could honestly say that your phone case really saved the day? Did you know that there's a revolution currently underway and that phone cases may actually be on their way out? Matt, are you ready to take the leap of faith?
No, not at all.
Neither am I.
It's amazing because the manufacturers spend so much time improving the strength and durability of their phones and advertising that. So you see things like Gorilla Glass Victus, Armour 2, Ceramic Shield, all these things that are saying how wonderful and strong.
Well, I'm still really nervous about taking my phone anywhere near water.
Well, that's right, and they're waterproof, water resistant down to certain depths and get a bit of water splashed on it. I remember one time we were on holidays and my daughter was probably first year university and I picked up her phone on the kitchen bench to move it at this holiday place we're at and it was so sticky and I said, "What's on that?" And she said, "Oh, I think I spilled a few drinks on it." So I turned the tap on and put it under the tap to rinse off all the liquids, all the sticky liquids. And my daughter, I've never seen her move so fast, dived across the kitchen to get the water. She thought I was going to wreck her phone. But I was saying, well, it's waterproof, so why wouldn't I worry about it? Now, again, not waterproof, but water resistant. A bit of water under the tap was fine, but it just, that stickiness, I wanted to get that off. It was disgusting. But yeah, some people are still a bit nervous about it. And some people go too far and go dropping in the swimming pool and go, "Oh, it's okay, it's fine," but then it's too deep and salt water's not great and they pull it out, it still doesn't work. So I recommend still being cautious as you are.
Caution, err on the side of caution.
But they do often, the manufacturers do often talk about just how good their phones are, the strongest iPhone ever or the strongest glass ever and all sorts of wonderful things. But what's the first thing that most people do is they buy their phone, then go, "Right, I better get a case." I don't even walk out the store without having a case on and a glass screen. And it's interesting, my daughter, one of my daughters, a different daughter, goes through glass screens at a rapid rate. And I think to myself, so did we just save hundreds of dollars in repairs on the glass screen, or was that other glass screen so weak that it broke and the real glass screen wouldn't have broken, so we've just cost ourselves $40 for another glass screen to go on top? So I haven't been game to try the other method, so I'm just sticking with the glass screen replacement at this stage because it does seem better, but maybe at the end of a year it was cheaper just to replace the screen in the first place. But there is a bit of a movement, and they are nice. When you pick up a phone without any glass screen, without any case, they're nice, they're sleek.
Yeah.
They're made to be thinner and thinner all the time. They do feel a bit slippery, which is interesting.
That's a thing, isn't it?
It is a little bit, just not terrible. They're not like a fish or anything like that, but they're a little bit slippery because they're so smooth and sleek. But I actually admire when I see someone pull their phone out of their pocket and it's got nothing on. I go, "Oh, that looks nice."
You notice it.
I do. But I just
every now and then I'll pop mine out of its case for a reason. There might have been a bit of dirt snuck in there or whatever, and I'll give it a bit of a clean. And it's like, oh yeah, this is a nice little unit.
Well, that's the other thing too, is when you take it out of the case, it's in perfect condition because you're still getting, no matter how strong or good they are, if you're using it, you're still going to get maybe a couple of scratches, maybe some keys in your pocket, maybe you sit it down somewhere, a bit of dirt on the actual bench. So you probably still get a phone in better condition, but you've had to cover it up to get that better condition.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's interesting. But just to give you some data here, the global phone case market, and now remember these cases are pretty cheap, $30, $40. So you're selling a lot to make up this $25 billion it was worth last year.
That's a lot of phone cases.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Wow.
And they're getting better. So reported phone damage last year, 78 million people in the US reported phone damage. That was down from 87 million a couple of years ago. So there are less people either reporting it or less people damaging their phones now. Maybe they're wearing
people
cases.
Damaging their phones just going to buy a new one.
Maybe, so they're not reporting it.
Disposable items, haven't they?
Well, almost, that's right. So I do wonder about the manufacturers, all these different things they're doing to make them stronger, and then people just put a case on them. Is it frustrating when Tim Cook from Apple sees someone put a case on a phone? Does he say, "What do we do all that work for?" Having said that, you walk into an Apple store, they sell your phone and then they'll sell your case as well. So it's not like they're saying we're not having cases. They've got Apple cases. So it's an interesting one. I'd love to hear from listeners whether they actually are going to try it. Are they going to try testing it out with
who's bold enough?
Yeah, that's right. Tell me how you go with it.
It's a leap of faith. It is. Few things are certainties in this world. Of course, there's always death and taxes, but another thing for sure is that technology just gets better and better and better, and this is certainly the case for drone tech. For true drone enthusiasts, though, the competition is hot, so prices aren't necessarily so ridiculous either, Matt.
No, and just the features on these are getting unbelievable now. And I remember the first drone I bought, I got it for a Father's Day present. The kids bought me a drone, and I destroyed it within about 3 minutes of using it because I tried to use the follow me. I went out in the bush out to a friend's farm and set it up in the air and then set it to follow my car and then got in the car. This will be cool. I'll drive along and the drone will follow. And it had avoidance technology, but it was very early avoidance technology. So it avoided a tree, but there was just a little stick, a little leaf that was sticking out from that tree, and it caught that and went tumbling to the ground. And I went, oh, wait up, I can't see that drone behind me anymore. And I went back and found a few pieces. Well, it wasn't a few pieces. It broke.
Oh,
but
right.
So, yeah, came home and said to the kids, that was good. Thanks for that 3 minutes of entertainment. The footage was captured at least. It actually captured it falling to the ground and crashing to the ground. So anyway, they're getting better now, and not just with avoidance technology. They're getting better with a whole range of things. One of the things I'm impressed about is the cameras. The cameras on them are incredible now. So, and I've got a bunch of different brands I've looked at, a bunch of different features, and I won't go into all the different brands and features, but if you're looking for different things, for example, you've got some that'll do 4K at 100 frames per second. Now, when these drones can go up to maybe 100 kilometres an hour, then 100 frames per second is probably almost needed because you're trying to capture things so quickly. But you've got 8K. I mean, most people's phones aren't 8K, but you've got drones that are capable of recording at 8K, so incredible resolution from that. Typically, they're only about 30 frames per second, but if you cut it back to 4K, some of those ones will do 120 frames per second. You've got the ability as well to have incredible zoom on them because typically you're flying along at a distance and zoom technology, you typically need a bit of focal length to get proper zoom. I'm not talking about digital zoom, which is just making the pixels bigger. I'm talking about proper zoom, but some of these drones feature a proper optical zoom up to 7 times. So that's not too bad when you're trying to zoom in on something.
Yeah.
Then the distance that you can run them away from where you are. Now, most people that are listening to this would be unlicensed drone operators. There are some people that are licensed, but if you're unlicensed, there's a few rules. This is Australia at least. One of the rules is you must be able to see the drone without any visual aid. So you must be able to look at the drone and go, I can still see it.
So you can't send it off for kilometres and kilometres?
No, but some of these drones are capable of working at a range of 20 kilometres. Other ones were 13 kilometres.
Yeah,
so
wow.
it's pretty impressive. Another drone had 16 kilometre range. So that's a lot further on. I think the human eye could see something without binoculars, without visual aid. I reckon you're struggling to see a kilometre. And depending on the size.
Yeah, you think about going to a lookout. Some of those lookouts you can see for much more than a kilometre.
That's right. But you remember you're looking at something much bigger. I'm thinking about a drone-sized device.
Yeah, okay.
I reckon
keeping the
a typical
resolution.
little drone to see more than just a little tiny dot. Because what you should be able to see, again, with the Australian rules, is I can see that drone, I can see where it's going. So you need to be able to make out the drone and see that it's going left or right or up or down.
Yeah, I gotcha.
A little tiny dot a kilometre away, because these drones are fairly small.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe a better eyesight than I have.
Maybe a little bit more. But anyway, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to see 20 kilometres away.
Okay, yes. Yeah, you're right.
And again, I'm talking about something the size of a drone. We can obviously see things millions of light years away when we see stars, but we're not seeing a drone at, I don't think anyway, at 20 kilometres. Some of these they try and keep under 250 grams because at 250 grams the rules change around the licensing and what you can do with them. But again, you think, well, that's pretty impressive that you can pack some of this technology into something that's 249 grams because battery life isn't too bad. Some have got 45-minute battery life, 43-minute battery life, some a bit lower, maybe 16-minute battery life for some of the smaller drones. So they're quite incredible. Probably one of the big things about them is that when you get to the really small drones, they really get impacted by the wind, which seems to make sense.
Yeah.
You've got a drone so small, you think, well, that's great, it's lighter, but then those wind gusts can move around a bit.
Inertia.
Yeah. But the problem, or the great thing about them, I find, is when you're looking at footage from a drone, when you say, go to this height and just stay there still and just record some footage, they look like they're on a tripod. It's incredibly still. Now, that's using a lot of clever technology on that drone to say, I'm going to stay here. Even though there's a bit of wind around and maybe some wind gusts or maybe some drafts, I'm going to stay exactly in this spot. And when I've looked at footage from a drone that I've looked at or that I've shot with that, I just think it looks like a tripod. It looks like a 200-metre tripod sitting there that is just so perfectly still. So they're pretty impressive with that as well. So the sensors are getting better, the battery life's getting better, the range, everything about them is getting better. And pricing-wise, well, you can spend $1,000 on a drone and get a pretty impressive drone, but you can spend maybe $300, $400 on a drone and get a pretty impressive drone.
Yeah,
so
right.
have a look at them. There's a whole bunch of brands out there. I will mention one brand.
Competition is hot.
Well, it is. DJI is still leading the way. They seem to still make the best drones, but DJI are manufactured in a country that some people don't like buying things from. So there's a bunch of other brands as well trying to capture different parts of the market. And in America, it's interesting because DJI is definitely dominant in America, but if they put some bans or restrictions there, or even if they put a bunch of tariffs on, that might knock around the market and maybe give some opportunity for other local manufacturers, or maybe it just means that there's Americans not using drones that are as good as our drones here. But have a look at them. They're fascinating.
Now, delivering public health messages is tough at the best of times. Carefully selecting the right medium to maximise the message take-up is a really tough job. Take that idea and multiply it by 1 million when you're pitching health messages to adolescents and young adults. Well, in the spirit of don't knock it till you try it, the US government has released a safety-themed dance album. Oh dear. Sure to get the young folks toes tapping while they learn about personal safety. Matt, is this arrow going to even get close to hitting its target?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of this. Do you remember back about 2012, Metro Melbourne, I think it was Metro Trains in Melbourne, released a Dumb Ways to Die video?
Yeah.
And it was a very catchy tune. I think it was something like don't set fire to your hair and don't poke a grizzly bear and all sorts of things. Piranha Bait, I remember using your private parts as Piranha Bait was one of the things there.
Yeah, it's become the background music to a lot of memes as well. Yeah,
exactly right. But that took off, and at the end of that, there were a couple of things about trains, looking both ways, don't step off a platform, just some things
But it
like
was
that.
an ad that almost made fun of itself.
Yeah.
This, I think, is taking itself a little bit too seriously. Let's get a dance track album that's going to get those kids at all the fancy parties jumping up and down. I don't see it.
Yeah, it seems to be working.
All right, okay.
There seems to be people downloading it, listening to it. They're getting people actually onto ears. Presumably it is younger people that are listening to it because it's a dance album. I don't really go to too many albums that are dance albums. Electronic beats, funk, hip hop. So they're not really my choice of music.
But what are some of the messages? I mean, there's 5 tracks on this.
So you've got one track called Off-Road Adventure. It includes safety reminders like helmet, goggles, boots, jacket. So there's things like that where the whole album, if you want to go and listen to it, it's called, and I don't quite understand the title, I must admit, it's called Where Safety Now Haven't We? Volume 1. Where Safety Now Haven't We? So I don't understand that. I'm obviously not young enough to get that.
Yep.
But 5 tracks on there. Protect Your Noggin is another 2-minute, 35-second track with a retro hip-hop vibe promoting helmet use. And I hope in that, I haven't listened to that one, I hope in that one that they actually say, when you put your helmet on, do the strap up. Nothing frustrates me more. I'm out riding my bike and I see other kids, in particular kids with parents that have got the straps dangling, and I think, just clip it. If you're going to bother to put on your head, just clip it, because if you fall off, the first thing that's happening is the helmet falls off your head before you hits the ground. So it's not that hard. Anyway, I'm on my horse now. I'll get over there. But essentially, I like the idea. And I remember Southwest Airlines, I'm sure it was, that did a safety video that was based around Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and only a certain number of ways to leave this plane. Yeah. And you can imagine when you get on the plane and suddenly you start hearing Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, you start, what's going on here? So it's a bit different. It grabs your attention. And Air New Zealand have been famous over the years for doing a bunch of stuff.
But they love to take the mickey, they do. They do. They're classic at it. They're just fantastic. They're
so they've employed
video.
people like Peter Jackson and used some of the Hobbit themes to do a safety message. They had Bear Grylls doing a safety message on Air New Zealand about adventures out in the New Zealand wild, but make sure you're safe on the plane. And they even had the All Blacks, the famous All Blacks rugby team in New Zealand, doing some safety messages there. So I think using a bit of humour, using something a bit different, because if you get an adult like you or I saying to a teenager, don't do this or put your helmet on and do it up or whatever it is, they're guaranteed to do the opposite, of that.
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
It's
So
gonna
then
get
you
the
think,
brush off.
well, say don't wear a helmet, and they go, okay, so we can never win.
So the question is, how seriously is this dance album going to take itself? And so we'll wait and see. The proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how much it hits its mark, I guess.
Well, you're right, and there are some numbers they can work on. So during an 8-year period in the last 8 years in the US, 3,200 injuries for people aged 13 to 24 from fireworks. So part of the message here is fireworks. And I must admit, I remember when I was young, we used to get those balls and, the ones that would shoot 10 balls in the air, and we'd shoot them at each other, which seemed like a good fun thing to do. But when I think about it now, it seemed pretty stupid. And my sister actually had one blow up in her hand when she was holding it to go and shoot 10 balls. It decided to shoot 10 balls into her hand. She ended up in hospital and hand was okay, but we started thinking about whether
Guy
that was
Fawkes'
sensible.
night must have just been perilous
That's
at
right.
any ICU. Yeah.
So the other one in that same period, same age bracket, 13 to 24, 5,100 injuries from phone-related incidents. Now, I don't know what phone-related incidents covers in that time frame. Is it talking on the phone while you're riding your bike? I'm not sure what a phone-related incident is, or phone-related accident, sorry. But there's obviously some numbers there. If this album's successful, then you might see some of those numbers come down. Maybe. You're not convinced. We'll see how it goes.
No, I'm not convinced. Now, if you could talk with your choice of any animal in the biology phone book, which one would you choose? Now, which one do you think was chosen by the biology boffins most recently as the next best animal language to decipher? I say most recent because we all know that we've been chatting with parrots since piracy was invented, and of course we've taught several of the great apes how to do sign language. The legend of Dr. Dolittle takes one step closer to becoming reality, though, with the enlisting of AI to get the lowdown and chew the fat with our highly intelligent ocean friends, the dolphins. Matt, AI is now making Aquaman look a whole lot less impressive.
He's still pretty impressive. He can go underwater for a while, can't
Yeah,
he?
he can swim underwater, that's good, but talking to the animals underwater now...
Well, didn't Sandy and Bud do it back in the mid-60s when they talked to Flipper? Wasn't
Probably.
that a detailed conversation?
The whole 60s Flipper thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So having the conversation, understanding these clicks and whistles and whirs and stuff.
And I don't know. So go back one step. This is Google has developed an AI language to speak with dolphins. And why do they choose dolphins? Well, maybe they were Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans, where Douglas Adams said, I think that the mice were the most intelligent creatures on Earth, followed by the dolphins. I think the dolphins were trying, and again, I'm only going on vague memory here, but I think the Vogons were going to put the hyperspace highway through Earth, and the dolphins were trying to warn humans about the fact that this hyperspace highway was going through. So that was their warning. And then at the end, obviously, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish was the title of his third or fourth book. So dolphins maybe were chosen because they were Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans, or maybe there was some data that showed that dolphins were actually having some good communication.
There's a lot of, I guess, anecdotal evidence, of dolphins being quite clever.
Yeah, so they basically took a whole bunch of data, and this is where AI is incredibly powerful. You and I could listen to a few whistles and clicks and go, oh, that sounds like they're making a noise that seems consistent with that noise there. Is that talking to each other? But when you take approximately 400 million parameters and 40 years of data collected by the Wild Dolphin Project, then AI can say, you know what? I can make something of this. And so they've been able to identify certain noises, for example, that were looking like there were dolphins trying to mate or being friendly with each other, or maybe dolphins quarrelling. And so certain noises, they could start to get to the point where, they were showing some sort of consistency in those noises. But again, it took AI to break that down and really say, this noise here. Now I can replicate that noise and have a conversation in inverted commas with a dolphin.
So if you can't get a dolphin to mate with you.
Maybe that's an objective. I'm not sure. I won't make any comment about the researchers here. So what they're doing next is they're saying, let's take these noises, let's create the same dolphin noises, which is pretty easy for a computer, for a soundtrack to do, and then start allowing the dolphins to request certain things. So if they're playing, there might be a red ball or a blue ball. And so get to the stage where you're actually saying to the dolphin, go to the red ball or go to the blue ball. So actually having a conversation. I can't imagine the vocabulary of a dolphin is extensive, maybe 20 words, maybe 40 words, but it's the understanding of that as well that's the important part. But then why not get to the stage where we do it with lots of animals. Maybe we don't have the same amount of data for dogs, for example, or, as you say, a parrot or something else. Maybe there's not the same amount of data. Cats probably don't want to communicate with us because they're pretty happy just sitting there being looked after.
There was a documentary that was about the sort of mewing that cats do and whatnot, and that cats don't tend to mew in the wild. They'll only mew as domestic. They've learned to do it because they're trying to copy us and indicate to us certain things.
Yeah, I thought that was them just saying, sucked in, I'm the boss of you.
Yes, so. That's right. Well, a lot of what they have to say is along those lines for sure.
Yeah. So this is quite fascinating. It's a fascinating use of AI, but also, to my mind, a fascinating idea where you could possibly get to the stage where you could type something in, not maybe Shakespeare, but type something pretty basic in and then have a computer create the noise that the dolphin would understand or an animal would understand. So, Dr. Dolittle, we keep talking about science fiction, children's stories, fiction in general, then turning into reality. And maybe Dr. Dolittle's not that far away.
This boat is sinking. Go get Uncle Jesse from the from the wharf.
That's right. Good on you, Flipper.
Acknowledging Indigenous perspectives has been a significant change in the way much of Western society operates these days. Commonly now in Australia and New Zealand, places are known by their two names, the European name and the local Indigenous name. Now, Apple have tuned into this and have added cultural names to their Apple Map app. Matt, what's going on with this?
I think this is a great idea, and it's actually been happening in Canada and the United States. A couple of years ago, they did an update there where they had basically Indigenous land recognition for various places. So at the moment, they've started with 250 dual place names for cities and towns, and then obviously keep expanding from that. It's not something you can toggle. You can't say, I like that idea, I'll turn that on or off. It's on. Yeah. Basically, they've turned it on now. So if you use Apple Maps in Australia or New Zealand, you will see these dual place names if you go and look for some of those, which I think is great. And we see a lot of it now with even rivers, just various things that we see in our society.
Exactly. Yeah.
We've got Aboriginal names for those as well as local names. Even I've seen in some locations street names that are obviously coming from some sort of Aboriginal origin, not so much dual naming it, but just underneath it you'll see the meaning of that.
Like a meaning.
The meaning of that. So I think it's good to basically get to that point where we've got some sort of linkage to our past and some sort of recognition of the Indigenous past in whatever country you might be in.
It's an acknowledgement. It's not necessarily a change in ownership or anything like that. It's just an acknowledgement.
Well, it's always interesting. I find history fascinating. It's always interesting to look back and see what's happened. It doesn't mean you've got to change the world dramatically today, but just acknowledging and recognising where we've come from and what we've done in the past.
And there's a story behind it, no doubt.
That's right. There is a story. Like the distance of the marathon. There's a story behind it.
Exactly.
We only find out by acknowledging and recognising history. They collaborated with various First Nations people over a 4-year-long consultation process before they did this. And I imagine that would have been a job in itself because you've got a number of Aboriginal nations around Australia. And I don't know so much about New Zealand, but around Australia there's a number of Aboriginal nations, and getting the right people in each Aboriginal nation to have the right conversations. And sometimes within those Aboriginal nations there are different clans in those Aboriginal nations. So suddenly you sometimes get the point where there's some disagreement about different names. So that's probably why they took so long to make sure they had agreement amongst those different people in those areas to make sure they had the right names there. But I think it's a good thing. It basically, in my mind, elevates cultural recognition on a global scale. So someone turns up from overseas, they pull out their iPhone, use Apple Maps to get somewhere, and look at that, that's named there. So it may not be significant for that person, but the fact that we're recognising some of that background, some of that culture.
And culture is so significant, you know, the connection to country anyway.
Yeah. So using technology to recognise culture, I think is a pretty clever combination.
Excellent idea. So who doesn't love a wonder of modern engineering? We live in an age of enormous towering skyscrapers and sporting stadiums with impossibly broad spanning roofs. Well, if you haven't done so already, then you need to jump onto Google and check out the new record-breaking bridge in China that spans the Beipan River. It's an impressively long way down, Matt.
Impressively long way.
A long way to Hockaloogie, as I like to say.
Well, I want to pick up on that. I remember when I've been to various high locations and it's safe underneath, I'll often take a coin and drop it and time it.
You assume it's safe.
Well, I look down there and I can't see anything dangerous to fall into. And then I get my stopwatch out and time it and then use S equals UT plus half AT squared to get
second equation there. Yep.
That's right,
Excellent.
to get the approximate distance, assuming that a coin is aerodynamic enough that it's not going to reach terminal velocity, it's going to fall at gravity with minimal air resistance. I'm assuming no air resistance there and maybe add a little bit. So I go, the time over there says it's 200 metres. Let's just check that out, dropping this coin and timing it. And it's just a good little way to see physics in the real world, I suppose. But this one, I don't know that I'd see it hit the ground 625 metres.
Yeah.
625 metres, that's a long way
That is a
from the
long
deck
way.
to the river down at the bottom. So it's now officially the tallest bridge in the world, measuring by the deck down to what's below, in this case, the river. So that's pretty big. China's been pretty good at manufacturing big bridges lately.
Yeah.
They've got 8 of the 10 tallest bridges, again measured that same way, and 43 of the world's top 50 tallest bridges. So they've been pretty serious about the manufacturing. They do have a slight advantage, I think, anyway. They don't seem to have the same regulatory processes that everywhere else in the world has. Or I'm talking about Australia, really, I know about.
Yeah.
So they seem to be able to...
So saying that these things go up and they might not guarantee your safety getting across.
No, I think they do. I think they just don't have so many processes of consultation.
To jump through, yeah.
Yeah, they say we're going to build that, and I'm sure the engineering is safe, but sometimes the people that are impacted by it might not be as well looked after. But I did want to look at what the advantage of this is. So where was it and why would you go and build a bridge that's this big, keeping in mind as well that the main span stretches 1,420 metres. That's a long way to go with nothing underneath you. It's a suspension bridge. So that's pretty big. So I went and had a look at it, and it's around a mountainous area. It's over the Beipan River, Beipan River in Guizhou, Guizhou in China. And the journey normally from one side to the other takes maybe an hour because it's a mountainous area. So you've got switchbacks and winding road, that's right. And that now reduces it to, a few minutes, however long it takes you to drive 1,420 metres. That's pretty impressive.
So the locals are super happy.
Exactly right. So the weight of it, so in terms of the engineering, there were 93 segments they used to construct it. And I always find it fascinating watching a suspension bridge being constructed because typically they'll have the guy wires that hold up that particular segment attached to that segment, and it's kind of like it's going nowhere. It's just hanging there, literally in the middle of nowhere. So 93 segments, they built it, 22,000 tonnes, and we've got a new measurement for weight, that's the weight of 2 Eiffel Towers. We haven't seen Eiffel Towers before, I don't think, in weight, but that's the weight of it, 2 Eiffel Towers.
2 metric Eiffel Towers.
That's right. Because they are metric in France, of course, that makes sense. So that's all pretty impressive. Then I actually had a look at something else, which I remember years ago I was in Louisiana and I was at a Microsoft conference and there was a golf tournament on, or like I say golf tournament, it was a golf tournament for the conference attendees, so a fun golf tournament. And they said, I was just across this bridge. And I went, oh, that's cool, I'll go. And so I got out early the next morning and jumped on the bus to go across. And we got on this bridge and we kept going on this bridge and we kept going on this bridge. And I looked at it later.
I'm glad you weren't walking.
Absolutely glad. Just go across this little lake here. That bridge, I looked it up afterwards. That bridge, I think it was something like Lake Pontchartrain. Americans, beg my indulgence there for pronunciation there, but something like that. But it was about 38 kilometres long across a lake.
Wow.
and the eerie part was, and the bus driver talked to us about this when we got there, the eerie part was that when you got out towards the middle, you could not see anything but water because the bridge wasn't that high. It was only 4.6 metres above the water. So at that height, using approximately 3.6 times the square root of the height above the horizon, you only can see about 7.7 kilometres to the horizon. That's assuming the Earth's curve, not assuming the Earth's flat, okay? So let's assume the Earth's round for a moment or a sphere for the moment. So when you're getting out towards the middle, 38 kilometres, you've got a long way to see land. So you do look and you just see water surrounding you everywhere. Apparently some people get a bit freaked out. Some people pull over the road and can't keep driving because it's just too freaky for them.
Wow.
So it's quite fascinating.
So is it a straight bridge or is it
It's a straight
got some
bridge.
yeah.
No, it's across a
so
lake.
38 kilometres of just keeping that steering wheel straight, not having to do any action at all.
That's right. Now, I looked at that one and I thought, I wonder how much time they saved. Now, that trip takes you in the vicinity of, say, 20, 25 minutes to get across that. if you went the old way around the lake, it's only about a 40-minute trip. So I really questioned whether or not it was worth building. And they built two. They built one initially, it had 2 lanes of traffic back and forth, and then when that got busier, they built another one beside it, maybe 15 years later. So they've got 2 bridges across this lake that saves maybe 15 minutes, which seemed a bit over the top. Whereas I was more impressed in China.
Be a very narrow sort of a lake, and
Yeah, well, in China, the saving on time is quite dramatic, much more so than the saving on Lake Pontchartrain. So I just think we're going to see more and more of this across the world, but across China in particular, because it is a good way to solve problems. Tunnels and bridges, they seem to do well in other countries besides Australia. Maybe we've got too many regulations here. But have a look at that. I actually looked at the photos and I just went, that just looks scary. I don't love heights.
Yeah.
Being on a bridge, you think is okay. You're looking straight ahead, that's fine. I don't know that I want to be looking sideways too much, which I shouldn't be doing if I was
I
driving.
wonder if it's
anyway.
got a footpath that you can walk across.
I doubt it because it would be too scary.
Yeah, wow.
Maybe it has. I didn't see a footpath. Again,
No.
the images I saw were of the whole bridge, which just looked incredible. As a scenic view at something, it looked incredible.
Being through a mountain pass as well, across a valley, it must get some winds blowing across it as well.
Yeah, well, that was part of
the
the
sheer factor there, yeah.
Yeah, that was part of their design. They went for a suspension bridge with a very small side footprint so that, again, the winds weren't impacting as much. And obviously we learnt some things from the old...
Tacoma Narrows, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, the old galloping... What was the name they gave it? The galloping ganders or galloping...
I don't know, but
gantry,
you can watch the video on YouTube, folks, Tacoma Narrows Bridge, and we learned a lot of lessons about engineering out of that one.
That's right, and obviously apply them now to bridges like this. But, yeah, it's quite fascinating.
So if you know how light works, then you'll understand that colour is just a function of the wavelength of EMR, of electromagnetic radiation, and the degree of tint or shade that you add to it. Surely then there must be a limit to how many colours actually exist. So, how can it be possible that a group of scientists now say that they've created a brand new colour that's never been seen before, Matt?
So we've got 3 cones in our eyes, presumably, which we pick up on the wavelengths of approximately red, green and blue.
Yes.
Yep. So that's kind of the way we understand it. Now, I do remember hearing a story years ago about someone, or maybe a few people, who had some extra cones in their eye and they could see extra colours because they had the ability to absorb different colours. Sounded fascinating, but that was an anomaly of just humans sometimes being produced with slight variations. So that seems like we understand colour a bit, although I always find it fascinating that we have RGB, red, green, blue, with our eyes, but then we print things on a printer and we use CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow and black. And you go, well, why wouldn't you print in red, green, blue? Because that's what we see in red, green, blue.
But, of course, the primary colours for inks are different to the primary colours of light.
That's right.
And I've seen some recent arguments online about this and people trying to tell each other what primary colours are and not prepared to accept anything, anyway, sorry, getting off.
You sound like you're reading some interesting sites there. So this is quite fascinating where some scientists, and it's not easy to do because what they're doing is they're shooting a laser into your eye, so basically laser pulses into the eye, and they target certain cone cells in your eye to then allow you to see different wavelengths. It sounds pretty scary.
So they're avoiding certain cones in your eyes, and therefore you're able to, because the cones have been targeted,
they're stimulating, as far as I can work out, these
specific colours you haven't seen before.
And so they've got this new colour experience, or colour they're calling OLO, O-L-O. And so apparently people, and I'm not sure I love the idea of this, but people get a laser set up at their eye, which doesn't sound like a great thing, and they have laser pulses shot into their eye.
Always been told not to do that, but
right.
Anyway.
And then they suddenly go, oh my gosh, I could see a new colour. And it's been blowing people's minds. Anyone that's actually watched this, had this done, it blows their minds.
So there's been no LSD involved in this as well?
No. And remember the pictures, the name escapes me at the moment, that used to have to try and focus not on the picture to see the shape.
Magic eye pictures.
Magic eye pictures, that's right. And
big in the 90s.
they were, and sometimes I would guarantee that people were looking at it going, oh yeah, I can see the ship there, with no way they could see the ship because you just could tell in their voice, but they just didn't want to be left out. I wonder with this, when someone looks at it and they go, yeah, wow, look at that colour, it's fascinating. And they're going, they can just see a laser pulse.
Emperor's New Clothes?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But let's assume it's all okay for the moment, because how do we validate this? The only way we could validate it is to actually have some laser pulses shot into our eye and say,
There's
oh,
a
yes,
leap of faith.
that's right, and there's that new colour. So it's fascinating that we're learning stuff. We thought we had a pretty good understanding of the eye. We thought we knew a fair bit about the eye. We've got optometrists out there that are really good with helping with our eyesight, and whether it be glasses or laser surgery. But now, and who came up with this idea? Who came up with the idea?
Well, I thought, colours are colours, right? And you've got, I don't know, the wavelengths between, it's roughly about 400 nanometres is your violet light, and then you've got about 700 nanometres of EMR as red light. And so that's only a certain number of nanometres that you've got in between that can give you different colours. And then, of course, you can put shade and tint in there. But there's still got to be a finite number of colours still. I've seen the Dulux and Taubmans and Wattle paint swatches that they've got. Sure, there's lots of colours.
That's right.
But there's got to be a finite number
surely,
of colours.
when you only those three items to combine in certain levels, then surely. But people that are watching it see it as jaw-dropping, surreal, it shimmers, it glows. So, but
There we go,
I do wonder
jaw-dropping.
two things. I wonder...
A jaw-dropping blue-green.
Yeah, something like that. But I wonder who said, let's try and stimulate cones in a different way with laser pulses to get a different colour.
Yeah.
That was the first thing. And having any idea whether it was going to work, I don't know. But then when they did it, they went, what can we do with this? So what is the point of this? And the only thing I could work out was maybe you can have some next-gen augmented reality. Maybe you could buy an augmented reality headset that says you can see a new colour if you buy our headset. I'm just struggling for the practical application of being able to see a new colour that didn't
But
exist
of course,
before.
you've got to trust it to have lasers shot into your eyeballs.
That's right, especially when you buy an item for a few $100s off the shelf and stick it over your head and go, this will be safe, won't it?
So here's something quite logical that I never really considered very carefully. It makes perfect sense that there are large areas of this planet that are GPS denied because it's just not physically possible. But there is a way around it now, and it's called quantum navigation. Matt, how does quantum navigation work?
With pretty good accuracy, actually. So it's one of those things that you get GPS-denied environments for a few reasons. One is, as you've mentioned, that it's hard to have great GPS around the North and South Pole because you're not spinning lots of satellites around those areas because there's not many people there. So that's one minor issue.
But GPS, I think it operates from microwave technology, doesn't it?
I don't know what frequencies it works at, but you're still transmitting an electromagnetic wave, which can be blocked.
Which can be blocked.
Yeah, which can be interfered with. And we've done the story before around the Kremlin in Russia.
Yeah.
They do some local overriding of GPS. So if you're looking at a map, you can't find, if you're just looking at your old sat-nav on your phone or in your car, you can't find the Kremlin via that because they use GPS signals that are stronger around there to confuse the real GPS signal. So GPS can be interfered with, GPS can be blocked. You can be in some parts of the planet where you don't have GPS. Now, if you're on a plane flying along, then you kind of want to have good GPS signals because we rely on that now. We used to rely on other methods of navigation, but now we've got GPS. So if something happens where it's jammed or it's spoofed or you've got interference, then you've got some other more basic things on a plane like compasses or modern versions of that, if you like.
Just see, you see the pilot of the A380 pulling out this old brass thing that his grandfather's handed down.
That's right, and then tapping it a few times just to get the needle going the right way.
That's right.
So when they do that, they lose a fair bit of their accuracy, as you can imagine. They've still got some idea of the direction they're travelling and they'll be able to see a runway eventually when they get to that landfall, but we've seen a plane many years ago shot down out of the sky because the pilot made a little error in terms of navigation. Now, again, that wasn't loss of GPS, that was a different scenario, but it's pretty important that we know where we're going because there are some countries that you don't fly over.
Exactly.
I always find it frustrating when you're flying on an international flight and you look at the map and you see a little squiggle that goes out around a certain area. Just go straight, like it's quicker to go straight, but of course going straight's a bit dangerous, so they go around those certain areas. But quantum computing, we keep talking about quantum computing, what we can do with it. Are we there yet? Is it working yet? Well, we're still some way away from having really good workable quantum computers. We've got little tests that work in very small subsets. We're also some way away from having them commercially available rather than just in some sort of experimental lab. But to give you an idea of the power of quantum computing and the power of using quantum, then you've got quantum magnetometers. Did I get that right? Magnetometers?
That sounds right.
And they're basically using the trapped atoms that react to Earth's magnetic fields for navigation. So you get to the point where you could have these on planes. So if you're in a GPS-denied environment, you can still keep your accuracy within maybe 20 metres of where you are. Now, standard GPS maybe gets down to 3 metres. So it's not as good as standard GPS, but this is not getting any external signal. So it gives you the idea of the incredible power, and that's what this is relying on, incredible power of quantum computing to be able to get things to a very accurate level, even though you've got maybe not great accurate data coming in. So it's not there yet, but this is just another thing that we'll find that you'll get better with quantum. They estimate at this stage that this level of accuracy is about 50 times better than our traditional backup systems. So presumably that means that our traditional backup systems get it right within maybe a kilometre compared to maybe 20 metres. So,
and that hopefully your pilot's not going to get the plane lost.
Not in a kilometre. A kilometre's still okay, you would think.
Yeah.
Except when you come to land. If you miss the runway by a kilometre,
then that's
that
an
might
issue.
be bad. But
hopefully
you
you'd
can
be
get
able
visual.
to see it if you can get a visual.
That's right, yeah. Whoops, a highway. I thought it was there. So, again, I suppose the thing here is that this is just the power of quantum, which we don't know what we can do with quantum yet, and we just don't know the power we're going to be able to capture. But there's lots of examples like this we'll see where we'll see quantum computing just go, wow, what an incredible usage of that, hopefully for the good, not for the bad.
Something of a revolution there. And that's all there is for today. There's nothing left to read here except a smattering of tea leaves in the bottom of a cup, and they're in the shape of a big old thumbs up. Thanks for another cracking Tech Talk, Matt.
My pleasure. And yep, thumbs up. I'll go and do some training now because I know I'm going to be running in a race at some stage against a robot. And I want to be able to beat them at least the first time that I race against a robot. So I've got to keep my training up.
Well, I'm off to go and source some drones. Got to get myself a drone.
You can do some droning of me running if you like. So.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in once again to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Remember, our Tech Talk is the best sort of tech talk, and when you're on a good thing, you must never let it go. I'm your host, James Eddy, signing off for another week. But before I go, a quick reminder. If you haven't done so yet, hit the like button and maybe even subscribe through your provider, and better still, get your friends into the action too. In the meantime, take care, and we'll see you in a week's time.